Diabetes Connections is brought to you by One Touch. Every touch is a step forward. By Dexcom. Take control of your diabetes and live life to the fullest with Dexcom. By No Foods, No Grain, No Gluten, No Guilt. And by Audible. Listening is the new reading.
This is Diabetes Connections with Stacey Sims.
This week, Tandem answers your questions about the newly approved and not yet released Basal IQ system, the one that suspends when you get low. The FDA took a lot of people by surprise by approving it with the Dexcom G6.
We did integrate G5. We did trials with G5. In the middle of that, Dexcom launched G6, and we decided we wanted to keep pace with Dexcom, and we wanted to be able to offer people the latest products. So we decided at that point to make a pivot and integrate G6.
Tandem's Molly McElwee tells us more. Molly's also a nurse, a CDE, and lives with diabetes herself. In our Know Better segment, a koala with type 1 may become the newest Dexcom poster child animal. You may have seen Quincy on social media. Now we'll hear from his caretakers at the San Diego Zoo. This podcast is not intended as medical advice. If you have those kinds of questions, please contact your healthcare provider. Welcome to another week of Diabetes Connections. I'm Stacey Sims, and I'm so glad to have you along. Welcome back to our regular listeners. And if this is your first time joining us, I'm so glad you found the show. Jump right in. We aim to educate and inspire about type 1 diabetes by sharing stories of connections. I've been saying recently when asked about the show that, this is the news show about type 1 diabetes you've been waiting for. So I really hope it meets those expectations. That's how I like to describe it these days. And a busy summer season as usual once the ADA Scientific Sessions kicks off. As it did last month, we start getting a lot of news because studies are released. The timing is usually right around these summer sessions. We had ADA last month. Friends for Life is coming up, and then AADE, which is Diabetes Educators, will be in August. But about Friends for Life, this is Children with Diabetes, Friends for Life, the Orlando Annual Conference. It is the largest diabetes family conference in the world. And I bring it up because I am presenting this year. I'm doing a session, but what I'm really doing is taping the show on site. Last year, I was really honored to give the closing keynote. This year, I'm doing a session, but what I'm actually doing during the session is taping a show. And that'll air a little bit later on in July, but you can take part in it. This is a game show, and we are going to have a lot of fun. If you're not going to the conference, you can still participate. And I am posting how in the Facebook group. So please make sure to join the Facebook group. It is Diabetes Connections, the group. I also had put information in the newsletter. So if you subscribe to the newsletter, you've already seen it. And I've been getting emails from people on that. But please let me know soon if you want to take part, and we'll put it out on social media so you can learn more. But you got to join the Facebook group to get in here at the last minute. And that is, again, Diabetes Connections, the group. All right, you saw the Dexcom Koala, Quincy. That was all over social media last week when that news broke. Some people were outraged. I mean, how can the koala get the G6 before me, before Canada? Some people thought it was great. I heard from several parents who had kids who either are about to start on the Dexcom or, considering it. And this made them feel better about it. So we're going to talk about that later on. And I think I have the best take on it. Not mine. I saw this and got permission from a former guest to post what she wrote about Quincy the Koala. And of course, we're going to be talking about the Dexcom G6 and the Tandem Basal IQ system. We talked about this earlier this year, actually, with my guest today, with Molly, and she laid out all of the information about it, what was submitted to the FDA. And to briefly recap, the Basal IQ technology is what they call predictive low glucose suspend. It is a feature designed to help reduce the frequency and duration of being low, of hypoglycemia. It is in the insulin pump because it is integrated with continuous glucose monitoring devices. Right now, with Dexcom, we're going to talk about what the FDA actually approved, which is ICGM, integrated continuous glucose monitoring devices, and Tandem is launching with Dexcom. So we're going to talk all about that. Lots of questions for Molly. But just so you know what we're dealing with here, Basal IQ, the low glucose suspend, should be available this August. The next step is called Control IQ, and that is their more closed loop highs and lows. So we'll talk about that. Diabetes Connections is brought to you by Dexcom. And, I remember in elementary school and in preschool, my son Benny, he was not at all self-conscious about diabetes. He was diagnosed before he was 2. It's always been part of his life. He is not a shy kid. And he would just show his friends how it was done. He would check and dose right in the middle of class. But, he's going into 8th grade. And I'm so thankful that he is very comfortable with diabetes. He doesn't hide it, but he certainly doesn't want type 1 to be the center of attention. And the Dexcom helps so much with that. Dexcom has made it easy for Benny to simply glance at a smart device to give him his reading. The Dexcom G5 was the first FDA-approved device to let you make treatment decisions without pricking your finger. He's got the G6 now, no calibrations needed. Unbelievable. This is so nice for him because all he has to do now is look at his phone or look at the watch and he can see his number. So again, Benny's not shy, but truly, like most middle schoolers, he doesn't want to stop what he's doing and really call attention to himself. It's been a really good thing for us. For more information, go to diabetes-connections.com and click on the Dexcom logo. My guest this week is a clinical services manager at Tandem Diabetes Care, the makers of the t:slim X2 pump, and of course, in the news so much, as I mentioned, because of the approval of Basal IQ. Molly McElwee Malloy is also a nurse and a CDE, and she lives with diabetes herself with type 1. Molly, welcome back to the show. Glad to talk to you again.
Great to be here. Thanks so much for having me.
All right, when we last spoke, which was not too long ago, back in February, you were explaining Basal IQ and talking about submission to the FDA. So here we go. It's been approved. Tell us again, what is Basal IQ? What does this mean?
So Basal IQ is a predictive low glucose suspend function pump. And what it does is it looks 30 minutes into the future. And if it looks like you will be below 80, it will shut off basal for as little as 5 minutes and up to 120 minutes to prevent hypoglycemia. When you rise 1 point above where that low threshold was, where it decided to discontinue basal, it will resume basal. So it's a very fluid action to prevent hypoglycemia, looking forward 30 minutes using the Dexcom CGM.
Is that 80 adjustable? Or is that the number?
It is not adjustable. It is a hard set number. You can set your Dexcom alerts wherever you like, but the beauty of this one and the alerts and alarms for Basal IQ are defaulted as off. So when it ships to you or when you download, and upgrade your software, it'll be off. And the reason for that is that it can really decrease the burden for the patient or the caregiver in the background by preventing hypoglycemia without having to alert you that it's doing this. Now, you can choose, if you so want to, if you love alerts and alarms. I personally do not. You can choose to be alerted and alarmed every time it takes an action. But I can tell you that the reduction in burden, as reported by people in the study, was significant. So you could actually sleep through the night and avoid hypoglycemia this way. So what we're hoping to do is have people, obviously, as they would like to and as they trust the system, default those alerts and alarms off, put your Dexcom alerts and alarms where you want, but let the system prevent as much hypoglycemia as possible in the background while you go about your day.
So let's talk about that. This in clinical trials worked as, no alarm. People would just kind of let it ride. I can see my son doing this. I would probably want him to keep the alarms on. I could see Benny just turning things off and saying, Mom, it's fine. Tell us a little bit about what it's like to use this in the real world.
It's pretty phenomenal to use this in the real world. So you just go about your day. You just sleep. You just exercise. You just do your life. And if hypoglycemia can be prevented, it will be. you went for some carbohydrates that maybe were absorbed differently, or, you ate your grandma's mystery casserole that has, an unknown amount of carbs, and maybe it was a little bit more aggressive than you would have intended. We can't prevent everything, but we prevent a lot of them. And so it should just go on in the background so that you can go about your day. That's stuff you shouldn't have to worry about.
So to be clear, if you give yourself too much insulin, let's say, by accident, or, you're, as you said, with carb counting, you over carb count. I think this is 50 carbs. It turns out to be 20 carbs. This can help, but this isn't going to prevent every low. Is that what you're saying?
Oh, yeah. No, it's not a miracle. Yeah, so you can always over-bolus. So it's really hard to take away insulin once it is bolused, particularly if you've overshot some carbs. I myself had this really delicious ice cream sundae the other day, and I really overguessed what was in it. And so there wouldn't have been, anything other than carbohydrates that would have been able to counteract that. So you do have to, keep in mind that there will be times when it can't prevent things, but it obviously can make it much less severe. And then when it can prevent, particularly overnight, during the day, when you're going about your business, it will do it, which is kind of the magical part of reducing burden. Because I know I worry a lot about hypoglycemia, particularly at night or other times, and with the system, there's just not that worry.
Tell us a little bit again about, you said 30 minutes into the future, to predict where the glucose levels are heading, and it automatically resumes insulin once the glucose levels begin to rise. When does it acknowledge that it's rising? Is it above 80? Is it above another number? I mean, I guess I've read a lot that this protects against rebound highs, which we get sometimes from overdoing it. But when does it kind of stop leveling off that insulin? Is it right at 80?
No, it's not right at 80. So it is 1 point above where it decided that, to stop the insulin. So when you start rising, so for instance, let's say the low was predicted to be less than 80, it cut off, and you got as low as 72. You get to 73, it cuts back on. Now, in 5 minutes after that, if you go back to 72, it's going to suspend again. But if you go back up to 74, it's going to go on again. And that's where we avoided the rebound hyperglycemia. Because as you suspend insulin for a period of time, you can kind of build up a bit of insulin resistance once you kind of let it go. And then that you also, with overcorrecting, can then end up sky high. And that's one of the things we were really happy about in our clinical trials, that we didn't have any increase in mean glucose between people who are using sensor-augmented pump therapy or regular traditional sensor and pump therapy and this system. And it's really due to the fact that it's so fluid, going on and off. And as soon as it sees the recovery starting to happen, it will release and resume basal.
So tell us more about the results from those clinical trials. Obviously, they were good enough for the FDA to approve this. What kind of good results did you see? I mean, when people start using this, I guess I should let you answer that first question first, but I'm trying to figure out, what should we expect?
You should expect reduction in hypoglycemia. So in the trial, we had a 31% relative reduction in time less than 70. Which means versus people who are in sensor-augmented pump therapy. So people were also using the sensors. This is not up against people on MDI or anything like that. So 31%.
So 31% when you compare the Basal IQ people to people using a standalone CGM.
Standalone CGM with pump.
With a pump, okay. So basically what a person who might be using it now would flip over to. I mean, obviously, we're a good example. We're using the exact same technology, G6 and the T-Slim X2, but we don't have the Basal IQ, so it would kind of be comparing to that.
Correct. And this was a relative reduction to that population in less than 70. And it was very simple to use. One of the things that we were really proud of at Tandem is our human factors and the fact that our pump is so intuitive. And so adding this technology, we didn't want to add any burden to the patient and learning the technology or operating the machine or anything more complicated. And 91% of our study participants said it was easy to use. There's no finger sticks, so there's no calibrating because we're using G6. And it is approved for ages 6 and up.
Yeah.
In general, the thing you should expect is reduction in hypoglycemia. And obviously reduction in having to do with finger sticks if you're using a G6.
All right, well, let's talk about that G6 integration. And more coming up from Molly about Tandem. But first, Diabetes Connections is brought to you by OneTouch. Have you ever tested your blood sugar with a meter and were unsure about the meaning of your result? Take the guesswork out of your numbers. With the OneTouch VarioFlex meter, it uses Color Sure technology to instantly show you when your or your loved one's blood sugar numbers are low, indicated by blue, in range, green, or high, red, so you can quickly get on with your life. You can also use the meter's built-in Bluetooth smart technology to seamlessly sync with the OneTouch Reveal mobile app, available now as a free download for Android devices on Google Play and Apple devices on the App Store. OneTouch, because taking a step forward starts by seeing where you are. Now back to my interview with Molly. The big question that came up with the FDA approval wasn't so much how does Basal IQ work, it was more when did the G6 get in there? Because we'd all talked about, and you talked about, it was submitted to the FDA with the Dexcom G5. The G6 wasn't approved at the time. So tell me how this came about and what it means.
Right. So we did go to the FDA originally with G5. We'd been on trials with G5. And then Dexcom submitted for the G6 sensor with this ICGM labeling, which is a pretty incredible feat. And it was a de novo application with the FDA, which means it's the first time this has been done. But that ICGM application allowed us to decide, well, you know what, we're going to go forward with our application, but we're going to put in for G6. Because with an ICGM, the accuracy is such, and the classification of the CGM went from a class 3 device to a class 2 device, which is it's just a different regulatory burden, that we were able to then incorporate it into our submission so you could have the latest and greatest technology. And I know that's a lot of mumbo jumbo for people who don't speak regulatory, but yeah, the ICGM is a specification that means that your accuracy is such, and you can prove the test and the outcomes as such that you can then integrate it without having to do full clinical trials. You just need to be able to do integration testing. So we'd already done the clinical trials. We just needed to be able to do the integration testing, which we were able to do, and submit and get approval. So anything with an ICGM approval going forward will be easy to integrate into a system.
So then the decision becomes Tandems, whether to go with G5 or G6, is my understanding, right? Can you tell us a little bit about what the thinking was there?
That is correct. Well, the thinking was that if, we could launch with G5, which would require some finger sticks, or we could launch with G6, which doesn't require finger sticks. And G6 will also be the sensor that we're going to be using with Control IQ, which will be our hybrid closed loop. And so the thinking also was people are going to be upgraded to the G6, and we'd rather them have the latest and the greatest, and we'd rather give that to them. So we decided we would just go for it, and we would integrate with G6, and we would be able to be on par with current technology and not a generation behind. So G6 is ready to roll with Basal IQ, and it will also be the sensor for our hybrid closed loop.
I don't know how any of this works, so I'll just ask straight out. Did you talk to Dexcom about this in terms of, hey, look, we're going to do Basal IQ with G6. We know you're just starting shipping. There's a big demand for this. They're not shipping full supplies of G6. As you and I are talking, Molly, I can tell you I was one of the first people to get this. And when I called for a reorder, they'll only send you 3 sensors at a time, as opposed to, with G5, you used to get a longer supply. I mean, it would vary depending by insurance, but we used to get 3, sometimes 4 boxes of 4 sensors in one shipment for G5. And they're saying there's such a big demand for this, we just want to get everybody started. So there's a concern among people who use the Tandem device, the pump, and really want to get started on Basal IQ, that they were banking on G5 and now they may be left behind. So I guess it's a multi-part question, but first, did you all talk to Dexcom about supplies and shipping?
We sure did. We absolutely did. And they may continue to decide to do the only a month at a time supplies and just to keep everybody supplied rather than doing, the 90-day supply. They may continue to do something like that. I know my next shipment isn't coming until the end of July. So I'm going to the last second with mine. And I get why. They're fit to capacity with this one. But I think it will work well for us because we'll be able to launch this as a software download the end of July or the beginning of August, which at that point they should be caught up. So people who are on G5, who want to get on G6, please do contact Dexcom and talk through your options. I know that they are upgrading people on G5 to G6. So talk to them about that because they do want people to be on G6. To people who were anticipating G5 or maybe were stockpiling supplies, I would have them contact Dexcom and talk to them and work through, what's a roadmap forward for me to get onto G6.
And Molly, I feel like this is a bit of an unnecessary question, but I have to ask it. I've seen it all over Facebook. What would you say to people who are writing comments like, well, my rep told me G5, I was lied to, I'm very angry at Tandem. Can you assuage their fears that there was something shady going on here?
Absolutely. They were not lied to. We did apply to the FDA with G5. G6 came out in the middle of our regulatory submission. And we decided at that point, okay, well, we're going to go ahead and integrate G6, despite the fact that we've done all the work to integrate G5 into this product. We're going to go ahead and put in for G6. So nobody lied to anybody. That was absolutely the truth. We did integrate G5. We did trials with G5. In the middle of that, Dexcom launched G6, and we decided we wanted to keep pace with Dexcom, and we wanted to be able to offer people the latest products. So we decided at that point to make a pivot and integrate G6. So no one lied. No one did anything shady. We made a pivot very suddenly once they got the ICGM integration that going forward, it would make more sense for us to be able to integrate with the latest sensor technology.
I also did get comments, by the way, when the G6 was approved saying, oh my gosh, now Tandem is never going to catch up. They're going to be stuck with G5. So I don't know if you can win for trying on that one to editorialize a little bit.
I know, you really can't. You really can't. But I do want people to know nobody tried to mislead anybody. We just decided that, towards the end that with the ICGM approval of G6, it made more sense for us to go ahead and develop that and integrate that. And no one lied to anybody. No one tried to mislead anybody. All of that was true. We just also integrated G6.
When you mentioned the update, the software update, because if you're not familiar with Tandem, the updates to the pump, you don't have to get a new piece of hardware. You don't have to turn your pump in. You plug the pump into the computer. It updates. We did this update just days after receiving the pump. We got it last year, right before the G5 integration happened, and I plugged it into the computer. It was wild. It was the first time I'd ever done something like that. It was very easy. What's going to happen with Basal IQ? Do we have to do more than that? Do I have to talk to somebody? Do I have to learn anything? Or can I just plug it back in?
The software update should be absolutely similar to that. The difference is that this is now a prescriptive device because it is actually changing insulin therapy. So what happens is you contact Tandem as a current user and say, yes, I want Basal IQ. We fax a statement of medical necessity to your clinician. They sign it, send it back to us. It does not go through insurance because this is a free upgrade to all existing customers. And we then contact you for your online training. Now, you can get in-person training if you need it, or you don't have access to a computer, or just computer learning is not how you learn. We can absolutely do this live. That is not a problem. But you can do it in about 15, 20 minutes online. And if you do it online, you'll do a little test at the end. You pass the test, you get a code, which then unlocks your software download. And what that does is it does two things. One, it verifies to us that you have the training, and to your clinician, we can show that you had the training. And two, it makes that prescription and that download code unique to you. So we have some traceability on who's getting what.
The test that you take, is that more like reading comprehension? You don't have to study up too much.
No, you don't have to study up. You definitely just can't fast forward, though. We we made them a little trickier than that. You do have to watch them.
But this is something new. I mean, I'm kind of teasing, but you obviously want to make this easy for people. But at the same time, like you said, it's dosing. I can imagine that between safety, regulations, just common sense, you want to make it easy, but you don't want to make it so we all just, scroll through, click like we do with, everything else online.
Oh, yes. Yeah, you definitely cannot do that. And we made that. We made it such that you actually do need to pay attention. And there's questions sort of along the way that you have to answer. So there's no fast forward. You can't hit play and leave the room and come back and take a test. These are things you're going to sit through. And again, it shouldn't take long to do. It's incredibly intuitive. But I love that we're doing this. And I love that we'll be doing this, for things going forward, because online learning for so many people, it's so much easier.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, you could do it on your phone, you could do it on your tablet, you can do it on your iPad, you can do it on your laptop. I mean, making an appointment, going in, scheduling, doing all this stuff, that's a big hassle. And it's a big, can be a big time sink. This is something I can do, in the morning before I go to work, or, in the evening before I go to bed. I can just do it when it works for me. Mm-hmm. And we really wanted to make that pretty easy for people to schedule. And we also didn't want to bottleneck having to get people through a specific training with a specific trainer to get up and running on Basal IQ. This really opens the door for once it's available. You take that training and you go.
That's great. What about previous customers of Tandem or current customers of Tandem who are not on the X2 pump? Is there a pathway for them to get this feature, get this new pump? Can you speak a little bit to people who are older customers of Tandem but not on the current X2?
And so due to that timeline, they should be either up for upgrade or already upgrade. So I would have older, non-X2 pumpers call into Tandem and inquire about when their warranty is up, because that should have happened.
Okay.
And if it didn't, they need to be asking about that. Because we did have a pathway for them to upgrade to the X2 pump. And if their warranty wasn't up for some reason, we need to investigate and talk to them about what their options are. So I know I wouldn't say a blanket statement on anything, but because insurance is so unique, right, person to person, but have them call in and talk to our customer technical support and our customer sales support, and have them ask those questions about when their warranty's up, and we can look all that information up for them to help figure out what the path forward for is. And anybody else who's interested in getting an X2 pump, again, we can look at the warranties and what the path forward looks like. You may be locked into a warranty that you can't get out of, but you may be up for a renewal.
And you mentioned this before, but it's worth saying again, this update is free for current customers.
Yes, all updates in 2018 will be free for existing customers.
All right. So, of course, I have to say, we probably will ask more questions about Basal IQ, but all updates? Are there more possibly by the end of the year?
I don't know anything yet, but I know that we have publicly said all updates through 2018 will be free. And so if there are, then yes, there will be. But for right now, that is Basal IQ, and that is ready to go at the end of July, beginning of August.
So let me ask you a little bit more about that iCGM feature. That's just integrated CGM. You mentioned you don't have to go through every trial, restart everything again for every new CGM that comes out. For Tandem, does that mean if there's, for example, the Medtronic has a standalone iCGM that comes out, or the implantable one that we read about, does that mean that any of those could possibly work with your pump, or is it a business agreement with Dexcom? Can you speak a little bit about that?
Yeah, so the reason that iCGM technology was agreed upon is for easier integration and for easier, working cross paths with different companies. So if another device had an iCGM classification and we had a business agreement, we could absolutely work with them. Now, currently Dexcom is the only one that has that classification.
Oh, okay. That makes sense. It's such a new world. It's so interesting to think about, where all of this could go. I think a lot of people would really like to be able to say, I'm going to use this pump with this inset, with this CGM, with this phone. I wonder, just thinking out loud, if we'll get there. in another 5 or 10 years where people can really kind of pick and choose between, all the different companies?
Oh, I think you'll see a lot more fluidness and people working together and being able to incorporate different things. So, in 5 years, I hope I can't recognize it. Like, it's so different and surprising, I don't even recognize it. Like, please do surprise me. But, I want it to be so awesome. But, yeah, things should continue to be easier to integrate with each other. And I think that interoperability is something the FDA has been pushing for and been very supportive of, which I applaud them for. That's not an easy thing to say, hey, we want to work with lots of different platforms and help them integrate. That's a really hard thing to do. So, and they've been very supportive of that.
Let's talk about what's next. Since you brought it up earlier, let's talk about Control IQ. You had mentioned that when we spoke earlier this year. This is the hybrid closed loop system from Tandem. Where do you stand with that? Clinical trials have started?
They have started. Our pivotal trial has started. If anyone's interested in obtaining information about that trial, you can go to clinicaltrials.gov. Or if you're interested in any clinical trial, clinicaltrials.gov is actually an enormous resource for searching for clinical trials that you may want to participate in. But you can find out more information about that and what would be the closest center to you for participation. Yeah, it started, and we're really, really excited, kind of sitting on the sidelines, waiting for results to come in. So, but it's going.
I know you can't talk a lot about it.
Yeah.
Can you tell me what the goal, though, with Control IQ?
I can't.
No. You can't? Oh, you can't?
No, I can't. Mm-mm.
Okay, but I can piece like hybrid closed loop. So we're thinking some user interaction with the device?
I can tell you still have to bolus for meals. Nobody's figured that one out yet, right? You still have to bolus for meals. But there's not a lot of user interaction otherwise. We're using the G6, so there's no calibrations. It's not a complicated system to use. And that's one of the things that I'm really proud to work with Tandem and be with Tandem on, is that we really strive our best to make systems that are easy and less burdensome for not only the user, but the healthcare professional to manage. So I think it's going to be sort of a minimalist closed loop, if you will, as far as having much interaction with it as a user. But I really can't go into much more than that, other than, obviously safety and efficacy will be priority. But this is a well-tested algorithm. It's been through the ringer, over 400,000 clinical hours. So I'm not worried about how the algorithm will perform.
For those of us who've been following this for a long time, is this the Type 0 algorithm?
Yes. So I didn't have anything to do with writing the algorithm, but I call it my baby. This is, my apologies to all the brilliant minds out there that actually wrote it. Tracing this back to its infancy, I participated in a clinical trial in 2006 as one of the first closed-loop clinical trials. It was at the University of Virginia with the Center for Diabetes Technology, Boris Kovachev, Stacey Anderson, Mark Breton, and that group there. And they were working on that product. And that trial was the reason that I changed my entire career to work on this. So I went back to school for nursing, and then I joined their group there later and worked in research for many years and worked, on this algorithm. And we were refining this algorithm and putting it in different pumps and trying different features and seeing how things worked. And eventually it came time to commercialize, and Type 0 Technologies was formed. And I joined Type 0 Technologies, and we then commercialized the algorithm and licensed it to Tandem. And then I went to Tandem. So I've been following this algorithm since 2006. I've changed my life to work on it. And I say algorithm singular. There's multiple things that are actually going on. It's much more complicated than that. But it's a thing of beauty, particularly in its simplicity and how you interact with it. So, without being able to say too much, I can say I changed my life to work on this because it meant that much to me. And seeing it integrate with a sensor that has no calibrations is sort of like, the heavens open up. It really makes it so much better. Because if you're not having to babysit a sensor, then, that just makes things incredible. I'm really excited for people to see what this is for them.
That's fantastic. And yeah, we've talked about type 0 on the show quite a bit. I'll link it up in the show notes for the other interviews we've done and more information. One thing I did forget to ask you about is a problem that we've experienced personally, and maybe you can address, or at least tell us maybe how to make it better. When we got the integration of the G5 and the X2, we used it for about a week, and then we turned it off, mostly because Benny can see his value on a phone. He doesn't need to take his pump out and look at it, and he always has his phone on him. But also because, and it wasn't doing anything for us, right? It wasn't actively integrated with the pump. But also because he lost the signal quite a bit. And his first question to me when I told him about this, because I was so excited, he said, well, is it going to be better with the signal? Can you address that? And maybe is there a better way to wear it or something that we should benefit from?
Yes. So 2 pieces of information there. First, the Bluetooth signal goes through the front of the face of the pump. Facing the pump outwards will always give you a better signal. Secondly, the G6 has a better signal than the G5. So you shouldn't be seeing that like you saw with the G5. But facing the pump out, that's half the battle right there. So most of the time when people are losing signal, it's because it's getting blocked by the body.
Oh.
I know when I've worn mine in my bra, for instance, facing inwards, I would get it blocked, I would lose a signal, but I wouldn't lose it with my phone, for instance. But if I face it outwards within my bra, then I don't lose the signal. So facing the pump with the face facing outward will take care of most of that. And then the G6 on top of that, just having a stronger Bluetooth signal.
Cool. We'll definitely try it. I mean, you'll hear from me if we're having issues.
Oh, and you should absolutely speak up. And I would say to any user that if you're having issues, please call in because we do address them. We keep your complaints on file. We look at these things. We try to make them better. So, yeah, don't suffer in silence. If you're ever having a problem, please just call and let us know. And maybe we can help you or give you a suggestion, or maybe we need to do something, or maybe we need to, figure out a better solution. So don't ever just, mumble to yourself. Call us. We're there to help.
Before I let you go, definitely just want to ask real quick about the Tandem Flex pump, which I understand is not going to be made anymore. Can you talk about that a little bit? This was the pump that holds, more insulin for people with very large insulin needs. What happened?
Yeah, so the T-Flex is a 480-unit pump that we really thought would be embraced by a population of really insulin-resistant persons who were, having to change their reservoir on a more regular basis. And it turned out that ended up being a much smaller population than we thought. Now, it's a very loyal population, and they love that pump, but it's a very small population for us. And so it wasn't economically feasible to continue to support and develop a pump that very few people were actually going to use. So obviously we will be supporting those people through the end of their warranty or helping them transition to an X2 pump. But we won't be manufacturing those in the future because it just didn't end up being that many people that wanted it. And like I said, the people that did want it and did use it were big, loyal customers. They loved it. Because if you can imagine, if you're changing your site very regularly, let's say you're on steroids very often, or you're using 150 units a day. Like I remember towards the end of both my pregnancies, I was on 150, 160 units a day. I was constantly changing a cartridge. That could be definitely decrease the burden on the patient to not have to change so often. So I get why they like it, but there wasn't enough to make that sustainable economically for us.
And I wonder too, there are different insulins now. There are double concentrated insulins that can be used in pumps. We haven't gone there yet, but I've talked to my doctor about it just because Benny has grown so much and is a big guy, and he has, he's in the middle of puberty. He'd love that I'm talking about this. And his insulin needs have gone up so much that we talked about the Tandem, the Flex, the T-Flex, but the T-Slim is fine for us. I mean, it holds up to 300 units of insulin, but we talked about going to the double concentrated one, and our endo's like, you're not there yet. But it is out there. I wonder if that's a factor too.
It could be. It would be off-label for right now. We haven't done any trials with that. Dosing with something that is 2 times concentrated or 3 times concentrated or 5 times concentrated definitely changes how you put in the profiles for a patient. And all of that would be off-label at this point.
But again, and I'm just trying to cover all the bases before I let you go here, we didn't really talk about pediatrics, and this is approved down to kids age 6. You obviously had specific pediatric trials. Can you speak at all to the results in kids?
We had great results in kids, particularly, in the fact that it's not alerting and alarming kids all the time. So, less alerts, because some of the kids, they do respond to alerts and alarms, and some of them, it's alarm fatigue, right? They're done. So you've beeped them, 5 times today, they're not going to listen to you anymore. And I get it. I mean, I might be there too. So having it happen in the background, we found for patients and caregivers, was a big relief. So we got a lot of great feedback particularly from parents, but also from the patients that they really liked that it, prevented the hypoglycemia without them having to know or do or just be aware of it. And we will be going for younger indication in future. It would be off-label below 6. But we really did have some great results. And particularly if you think about this population overnight, and you're worried about hypoglycemia overnight, and then this, kind of relieving a bit of that worry, that can make a big difference, particularly, as sleep. Oh. Sleep is important. People like to sleep a lot. It turns out it's a good thing.
Yeah, it's kind of good for your health, too.
It's amazing. It's amazingly good for your health. And as a parent and caregiver, as you know, it's very good for your health to be able to take care of somebody else, to be able to take care of yourself first. And if you're not sleeping, then how can you do that? So this was some big feedback we had. The other feedback we had that was it was anecdotal from Bruce Buckingham at Stanford, but it was interesting is he said that his patients, he realized, weren't eating around the lows. So people were eating to prevent lows previously or in the sensor augmented pump group. And then with Basal IQ, they weren't because they weren't going low. They weren't having to worry about that as much. Not that we were able to present 100% of all lows, but, think of the extra snacks and then the rebound highs from that. So I imagine we'll see some increased quality of life and maybe even decrease in total daily dose.
I'm really hoping that helps. That's one of the things that we talk about a lot is Benny will exercise or he'll play sports and then he'll go low and he's like, okay, now I'm drinking calories that I didn't want. I mean, he's not dieting by any means, but he's a big kid and he really would like to, those lows are just extra calories. And oftentimes from sports, you're like, oh, I can't win. It's very frustrating. So we're hoping to see that. That'd be great. All right. So I have a scenario for you. And the answer, I can't answer this, is totally acceptable. But here's the question. Somebody has a stockpile of G5s, let's say, because I don't know if you know, Molly, but people do use those longer than FDA approved. They restart them. So, right? So people have a stockpile of G5s that's going to take them through the end of the year, let's say. I don't know. I don't have that kind of supply, but let's say somebody else does. They're concerned they're going to miss the free update. I really don't. Trust me, I don't. But, all right, so they're concerned they're going to miss the free update. So they decide, all right, I'm going to update my X2 in August so that I can get the G6 integration. But I'm going to turn it off after I get it and just use the G5 as a standalone. Can that be done?
Oh, absolutely. So Basal IQ, when you go into the options under the pump menu, you can turn Basal IQ on or off. This can be a regular pump or it can have Basal IQ enhancement. So you can absolutely do that. There's no reason why you couldn't do that.
I just was thinking it might be an option for people who don't want to waste those G5s.
Oh, sure. And I can totally understand that. I mean, yeah, we all pay a tremendous amount of money for our extra supplies and we should be able to use all of them. So yeah, you could download and then just not turn it on until you're ready to use it. Yeah, you can refresh that training anytime on the website. So if you want to retrain later when you're ready to use your G6, we will have that information ready for you. So there's no reason you couldn't do that.
And there's no reason to expect Tandem to suddenly say, we're going to do an update and we are going to include G5. You guys aren't going to go backwards.
No, that's one thing with technology you won't see people do is walk backwards, which is really not effective.
Well, I should have asked this at the beginning, Molly. Have you used Basal IQ?
I am currently using Basal IQ. Yes.
Oh.
And I can tell you it's a game changer. It's a game changer. Since its approval, I am using Basal IQ, and it is a game changer.
Can you give us an example or two of how it has changed the game for you?
So I have I have really significant hypoglycemia unawareness, which for people who aren't familiar with that means I can be walking and talking with a blood sugar of 20, and have no symptoms, which is pretty scary. I also, even though I'm an educator and a nurse and I have really expert knowledge on insulin titration, I battle with hormones and how they affect my blood sugar just like any other person or woman. And during those times of months, whether it's an ovulation or it's a menstrual cycle, I can have pretty significant lows, particularly this can happen in the overnight area. And I should have had that last night, and I did not.
And you attribute that to the Basal IQ. Does it tell you when it kicks in? It must, right? It shows you?
You can see it on the screen. I don't enable the alert or the alarm, but you can see that it did that. Like
when you wake up in the morning, you can look at the screen and say, look, here it is.
Yeah. The first thing I showed my husband, I was like, look, I was expecting last night to be real dizzy. And he was like, yeah, I was too. Because we're usually, I usually tell him like, oh, tonight's going to be rough. Just be aware. It's going to suck for both of us. But it didn't happen. And I slept instead, which was amazing. So to me, that's a game changer. I have 2 little children, and so sleep is very precious. And when my children take away my sleep and my diabetes take away my sleep, I'm very grumpy. So, and not as effective. So if I can, I know I can't solve the children's sleep part as well, as easy as I could solve this other part, but hey, if I can knock this one thing out and get a little bit more sleep, to me, that is a total game changer.
Well, Molly, thank you so much for joining me to talk about this. I appreciate your openness. I appreciate that you're using this. I mean, I think that's fantastic that you're able to share that with us. Definitely keep me posted if you could, and, happy to get the word out whenever we can.
Absolutely. And I encourage anybody who has any questions, go ahead and call us at Tandem. We'll be happy to talk to you.
You're listening to Diabetes Connections with Stacey Sims.
Lots more information about Basal IQ, about the offers and explanations from Tandem that Malloy mentioned. Just go to diabetes-connections.com or check out the show notes wherever you're listening on a podcast app. Most of them might be hard to find. I like to say this every couple of shows. You kind of have to click here for more. Sometimes it says more information. Sometimes it says more about the show. But I do put links and information and time codes on every show so that you can kind of see where everything happens. And I hope that's helpful to you. If you are listening on social media, a lot of people listen right through Facebook. That's great. I try to put some links up on the page and in the Facebook group. But if you're ever missing anything, you can always shoot me an email, Stacey@diabetes-connections.com. That, playing on social media, it's a great way to listen to the show. Tough way to get the information. So I urge you to subscribe on a podcast app. But hey, if that's how you like to listen, please just make sure that you know where to get the information if you want it. Okay. And just adding, I know that I will keep you posted on our experiences. Interestingly, Benny is not convinced that he wants to try this. As I said to Molly, we have not had the best luck with the G5 getting the signal on the t:slim X2 pump. So we turned it off ages ago and just have the numbers on the phone. I'll keep you posted on how all of that goes because, we use this stuff. Tandem is not a sponsor. Dexcom is obviously, but that doesn't matter. If it doesn't work, it doesn't work. I will definitely keep you posted as we get closer to launch, and hopefully it'll be a great experience. I'm certainly very excited about it. Okay, in our Know Better segment this week, you've heard about Quincy the Koala. If you're anywhere on social media, you saw the koala with the G6 CGM. The koala has type 1 diabetes. We're going to talk about it. Know Better is brought to you by No Foods. I just had their muffins this morning. The chocolate chip muffins are delish. No Foods, made with superfoods, chia, flax, coconuts, almonds, and egg whites. And they are grain, gluten, wheat, soy, dairy, peanut, and yeast free. It can be very difficult to find convenience foods, let's call them, if you're trying to eat this way, if you're trying to eat dairy-free, gluten-free, grain-free. It's not as though you can just walk by a convenience store and, grab a variety of foods. And that's what I really love about Know Better Foods. I have found that while we use them at home, quite often, I'm grabbing one as I'm running out the door or when I'm traveling, just to make sure I have something, I'm gluten-free, that, that I can eat, that I feel good about, that I know tastes good. Of course, we do have them at home. The waffles are a big hit, and the chocolate chips to bake with. But this, to me, has really become part of my packing. And let me know if that's how you use it as well. Find out more. Go to diabetes-connections.com, click on the No Foods logo, and use the promo code STACY10 to save at checkout. All right, let's talk about Quincy the Koala. I'm going to have some audio from the San Diego Zoo here in a minute, and then I want to give you the take that I mentioned at the very beginning of the show. One of my friends and a former guest here on Diabetes Connections, I think, had a great take on Quincy and all the publicity about this. But here's what happened. A group of San Diego-based experts came together in June to help a koala with diabetes at the San Diego Zoo. I'm reading from a news release. And actually, I should mention, this is a news release. The audio is from what they call a video news release, a VNR, which means that the interview was done by a production company or, somebody within the organization. This was not done by a news reporter. Just so you know what you're hearing, I didn't actually question these people. I'm playing the audio that they sent me. I didn't think this needed an in-depth investigative report. But to continue, the koala, a male named Quincy, has been diagnosed with type 1 diabetes. The experts representing veterinarians, endocrinologists, biotechnology professionals, and San Diego Zoo animal care specialists took a course of action designed to better manage Quincy's blood sugar levels through the application of a glucose monitor. Here is Cora Singleton. She is a senior veterinarian with the San Diego Zoo.
Today we saw Quincy, who is a 3-year-old male Queensland koala, for placement of a continuous glucose monitor. Several months ago, his keepers discovered that he was not maintaining body weight and was drinking a lot. And those are two of a few classic signs of diabetes. So at his first health exam, he was documented to have diabetes, which is fairly infrequently reported in koalas. One of the things we're really excited about for Quincy is, number one, the fact that we won't have to do finger sticks for his blood sample collection twice a day, and I think he'll be happy with that as well. And the other really great benefit of this technology is that we'll be able to see his glucose value at any point in time, so we can see how his glucose peaks and troughs in relation to the insulin dose that he's getting. And this will really help us tailor his insulin therapy very specifically to him.
The application of the monitor went very smoothly, and they look forward to having information that will help them develop a treatment plan to improve Quincy's condition. Diabetes, as we all know, is tough enough in people. Dr. Athena Philosamikis, corporate vice president of the Scripps Whittier Diabetes Institute, says it's really tough in an animal.
First of all, this is probably an incredibly unique situation. There are not a lot of koalas that have diabetes in the world, and this is fascinating for all of us to be able to see and look at the outcome of treating the koala, monitoring the koala, watching everything that he does and how it impacts his blood sugar levels. Quincy's story is interesting because you have a patient that really can't talk to you necessarily and tell you what's going on and how they're feeling, and yet you still need to treat them to optimal blood sugars. So it's an example of how we can use the technology to tell us what's going on in his daily life and then be able to deliver the right medication to treat him. But it also is an interaction on how remote monitoring and interventions can be done with our patients as well. So it's a great example of being able to track this and then being able to do something about it. And we can do that with our patients also. I think the most interesting thing about this is the fact that we have really been able to use digital communication and monitoring to manage this entire situation. This is something that's absolutely going to be the future of medicine. And being able to see how this can be done in real time here with a patient like Quincy the Koala, and our partners here with the zoo, with Dexcom, and with Scripps, just shows us how the future of medicine is going to progress as well. The opportunity to monitor Quincy is a nice representation of how we can do a project like this in our hospitals as well. And we are currently doing a research study at Scripps in Chula Vista and Scripps San Diego, where we monitor patients who, similar to Quincy, can't always respond appropriately. They might have lower levels of consciousness, and we can only use monitoring to determine our therapy. So in a very similar way now, we can monitor and learn from Quincy. We can also translate that to our patients in the hospital and how we might need to treat them as well.
Koalas normally sleep. They are very solitary animals, and they are hoping that this will make it so that they have to disturb Quincy less. I feel the same way about my teenage son. The less I have to poke him when he's sleeping, the better. Okay, so there was a lot of humor about this, and there was also, there was some anger. And I understand that, because right now the conversation is very much, well, here on the show, it's very much about advances, right? We want, what's next? What's coming up? What do we got? But it's very much about access and about affordability, because all this stuff is great if you can afford it, you can get it, but it's very, very difficult for the majority of people with type 1 diabetes to pay for much of this, especially if their insurance stinks and they have to pay a lot out of pocket. So I get it. I really do. But Trip Stoner, and yes, that is her name, she's been on the show before. She's a fantastic advocate, very much involved in government in Georgia. If you remember the Diabetes Government Day, she organized that and is really making a great difference in our community. And she had a great Facebook post about this, talking about how come this guy is a CGM that, my insurance won't even cover. People in Canada and other countries can't get this. Did he have to wait 3 years to get permission to share his data with his keepers, like everybody had to who has Medicare? How many carbs are in eucalyptus leaves? How come mice get all the cures? Koalas need cures too. I think she made that one up. But she's talking about, in the post that she put out there, about how Quincy could really be a poster awareness animal, in her words, for equal access and the hashtag insulin for all. And she's not kidding. This is a cute animal. And this is an animal that people without diabetes who are not in our community could see and say, what is that? And then realize, well, I have a cousin with type 1, or I have a coworker with type 1, or I have a Facebook friend with type 1. Do they have this? Do they know about this? And then it's up to us to say, yes, we know about this incredible technology, but you know what? It's really expensive. And it's really something that we all need to look at. Hey, can we talk about healthcare? Can we talk about Medicare? Can we talk about my beliefs and ideas and open up that conversation? I think what Tripp talked about here, and she made her Facebook post public, and I'll put it in the Facebook group too, is a great take on Quincy. Because look, Quincy did not take a G6 away from you or me or anybody. The zoo did this. Zoo animals all over the world are getting medical care, sometimes better than humans, and that isn't going to change. To me, that's a separate thing. People devote their lives to helping animals. People give their money to helping animals. It's not a zero-sum game where Quincy gets a G6 and your child did not get one because the koala got one. But I do think it opens up the door for this kind of conversation. So I'm embracing it. I'm telling my friends who are sending me the pictures, yes, isn't that great? And here's what you should know and can do. Let's use this cute little guy to help us all out. And by the way, Trip, I have no idea how many carbs there are in eucalyptus leaves. I can't even say it right. I just looked it up, and all I can find is eucalyptus tea. So I owe you a cup of tea, my friend, the next time we meet up. I have a feeling she'd prefer to drink something else. And now you know better. How How's your summer? Man, we are busy, 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 and that's the way I like it in the summertime. Doing a lot of travel, seeing relatives, dropping kids up at camp. And yeah, my daughter is going to a high school camp up in New York, so I was able to go visit some relatives when I dropped her off there. Benny finished diabetes camp, and he is going to go to his regular camp. And I'm going to try to talk to him. A lot of you told me you really liked hearing his conversation about camp. So I'm probably going to talk to him again about what we do for, quote, regular camp. I think that would be pretty helpful. A lot of people have asked me over the years, this has been his 6th year away at a multiple week non-diabetes camp. He went for 2 weeks when he was 8. He is now 13, and he goes for 4 weeks, just like most of the other campers. And it is always an adventure, but we do make it work. The one thing I will say is there is a good medical staff at this camp. They did not know anything really about type 1 diabetes, but they are there. There is an actual infirmary. I'm not sure I'd feel comfortable sending him away for 4 weeks when they didn't have a medical staff. So I'll at least say that. But I'm also going to Friends for Life, as I said at the very beginning of the show. If you want to get into the game show that we are doing there, please join the Facebook group, Diabetes Connections, the group. Links are always in the show notes. And we will have more information. If you're attending, I'll be doing that Wednesday session. You'll also see a lot of me at the raffle area. I decided to help out with the raffle this year. I donated a couple of cool prizes, including a Disney fireworks cruise on Saturday night during the conference. So if you're going to be there, please stop by, say hi, and get a raffle ticket. Okay, Diabetes Connections is also brought to you by Audible. And have you heard about Reese Witherspoon's book club? She has the book club Hello Sunshine, and now it's on Audible. I've been seeing ads everywhere. Well, you can join her book club and join us as well. Yeah, you can just click on the link. As a Diabetes Connections listener, you are eligible for a 30-day free trial and 1 free download from Audible. These are audiobooks. It's part of Amazon, and I love it, especially with all this travel. I always have something to listen to. So if you want to be part of the Hello Sunshine book club, go ahead, and you can still get your book for free through me. Just go to diabetes-connections.com and click on the Audible logo. Big thanks, as always, to my editor, John Buchanan with Audio Editing Solutions. And big thanks to you as you listen. We've been doing this show for more than 3 years now, 175 episodes, lots of great guests, and so many amazing listeners. If you like what you hear, tell somebody who's touched by diabetes. Tag them on Facebook, send them an email, let them know about the show. It's how we've grown since day one, since your word of mouth. And now with thousands of listeners, I really feel like these stories are getting out to people and they're really making an impact. I'm hearing that they're helping people, which is just incredible. And send me your stories. Love to share what you have to say. That's why I'm here. I'm Stacey Sims. I'll see you back here next week.
Diabetes Connections is a production of Stacey Sims Media. All rights reserved, all wrongs avenged.